The evening of December 7th, 2020, should have been just another quiet night in the world of space science journalism. But at 9:47 p.m. local time, when the first excerpts from Haim Eshed's explosive interview with Yediot Aharonot began circulating online, everything changed. The former head of Israel's space security program, a man who had spent 3 decades safeguarding his nation's most classified aerospace secrets, had just shattered the silence on humanity's greatest mystery. Eshed wasn't some fringe conspiracy theorist posting blurry videos on social media. This was a brigadier general, a man who had launched over 20 Israeli satellites into orbit, who had been awarded the Israel Defense Prize 3 times for work so classified that even today, decades later, the details remain locked away in government vaults. When someone of his caliber speaks about extraterrestrial contact, the world listens. The UFOs have asked not to publish that they are here, Eshed stated with the calm authority of someone who had spent his life dealing with state secrets. Humanity is not ready yet. His words carried the weight of absolute certainty, as if he were discussing satellite trajectories or launch windows rather than the existence of an intergalactic alliance. But it was what came next that truly sent shockwaves through the global community. Eshed didn't just claim that aliens existed. He revealed the existence of what he called the Galactic Federation, a sophisticated coalition of extraterrestrial civilizations that had been monitoring Earth for decades. According to the former space chief, this federation had been in direct contact with both Israeli and American governments, conducting joint operations and sharing technology in ways that defied every assumption about humanity's place in the cosmos. The specificity of his claims was staggering. Eshed spoke of underground bases, of collaborative research programs, of agreements signed in the shadows of national security. He described how these beings had been studying human behavior, conducting experiments, and gradually preparing our species for eventual full disclosure. Most remarkably, he claimed that a joint human-alien facility existed on Mars, where representatives from Earth worked alongside members of this cosmic alliance. Within hours, the interview had exploded across international media. News outlets from CNN to the BBC scrambled to verify the claims, to find corroborating sources, to make sense of statements that seemed to emerge from science fiction yet came from one of the most credible figures in modern aerospace. Social media platforms erupted with a mixture of fascination, skepticism, and genuine fear. The hashtag #Galactic Federation began trending worldwide as millions grappled with the implications of Eshed revelations. The response from official channels was predictably muted. NASA issued a brief statement emphasizing their commitment to the search for extraterrestrial life through conventional scientific methods, carefully avoiding any direct comment on Eshed's specific claims. The Israeli government remained entirely silent, neither confirming nor denying the assertions of their former space security chief. The Pentagon, which had recently acknowledged the existence of unidentified aerial phenomena, offered no response whatsoever. But behind the scenes, according to sources who would later speak anonymously, the reaction was far more intense. Intelligence communities across the globe reportedly convened emergency meetings. Secure communication channels buzzed with urgent discussions about damage control, about the implications of such a high-profile disclosure, and about the potential need for unprecedented crisis management. Eshed himself seemed remarkably calm in the face of the global storm he had unleashed. In follow-up interviews during the weeks that followed, he maintained his composed demeanor, speaking with the measured tone of someone who had spent decades navigating the most sensitive corridors of power. He explained that his decision to speak publicly had been carefully considered, motivated by a belief that humanity had reached a level of technological and social development where such knowledge could be responsibly shared. "There was a time when we weren't ready," he explained in a subsequent interview with Israeli Channel 12. "We were too primitive, too volatile. But now, with our advancement in space technology, with our growing understanding of the universe, perhaps we can handle the truth." His words suggested not just personal conviction, but knowledge of ongoing assessments by the Federation itself about humanity's readiness for contact. The timing of his disclosure raised important questions. Why now? Why, After 3 decades of maintaining absolute secrecy, had Eshed chosen this moment to reveal what he claimed was one of the most significant secrets in human history. Some analysts suggested that his advanced age, he was 87 at the time of the interview, had freed him from career concerns and allowed him to speak his conscience. Others theorized that recent developments in space exploration, including increased civilian access to space and the growing frequency of unexplained aerial phenomena, had made continued secrecy untenable. The scientific community found itself in an unprecedented position. Here was a claim of extraordinary magnitude, made by a figure whose credentials were beyond question, yet supported by no publicly available evidence. Traditional peer review processes seemed inadequate when faced with assertions about classified international agreements and secret facilities on other planets. Some researchers called for official investigations, while others urged caution, emphasizing the need for verifiable data before drawing any conclusions. International space agencies faced their own dilemma. If Eshed's claims contained even a grain of truth, it would mean that decades of public space exploration had been conducted alongside a parallel, hidden program of unprecedented scope and secrecy. The implications for space law, international cooperation, and the fundamental assumptions underlying civilian space programs would be staggering. Meanwhile, UFO researchers and enthusiasts saw in Eshed's statements a vindication of theories they had been proposing for decades. The idea of a Galactic Federation monitoring Earth's development aligned with countless witness testimonies, unexplained sightings, and patterns of government secrecy that had characterized the UFO phenomenon for generations. For these communities, Eshed's disclosure represented not a shocking revelation, but long overdue confirmation of what they had always suspected. The media struggled to find the right tone for coverage. How do you report on claims that sound like science fiction when they come from someone whose expertise is beyond question? How do you balance healthy skepticism with the respect due to a distinguished military and scientific career? Some outlets treated the story as entertainment, focusing on the more sensational aspects of the claims. Others approached it with the gravity due to any statement from a former high-ranking defense official, regardless of its content. As the initial wave of global coverage began to subside, a curious pattern emerged. Despite the enormous international interest in his claims, Eshed began to retreat from public view. Requests for follow-up interviews went unanswered. Speaking engagements were quietly canceled. The man who had just made what could arguably be called the most important disclosure in human history seemed to be deliberately fading from the spotlight. This retreat would prove to be more than a simple desire for privacy. As investigators would later discover, the weeks following Eshed's initial disclosure marked the beginning of a systematic campaign to limit his public appearances and control the narrative around his claims. What had started as a revelation would soon become a mystery in its own right. The mystery of what happened to Haim Eshed after he dared to speak the truth about humanity's place in the cosmic community. The stage was set for a disappearance that would raise questions not just about the existence of extraterrestrial life, but about the lengths to which powerful forces might go to maintain the secrets that Eshed had begun to expose. His revelation had opened a door to possibilities that challenged everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. But that same revelation may have sealed his fate in ways. The first sign that something was wrong came on January 15, 2021. Exactly 39 days after Haim Eshed's explosive revelation about the Galactic Federation, Dr. Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist specializing in aerospace and defense matters, had been attempting to secure a follow-up interview with the former Israeli space chief for weeks. Her initial requests through official channels had been met with polite deferrals. Eshed was considering his options, she was told, and would respond when ready. But on that cold January morning, when Chen finally received a response, it wasn't what she had expected. The message came not from Eshed himself, but from what appeared to be a legal representative, stating simply that General Eshed would not be granting any further interviews on the subject of his recent statements. No explanation was provided, no future availability suggested. The door that had been cracked open just weeks earlier was now firmly closed. Chen wasn't alone in her frustration. Across the globe, Journalists, researchers, and documentary filmmakers who had been pursuing the story found themselves hitting the same wall. Phone calls to Eshed's known contacts went unreturned. Emails disappeared into digital silence. Even academic institutions that had previously hosted his lectures reported that all scheduled appearances had been indefinitely postponed. The pattern was so consistent, so coordinated, that it began to raise questions beyond simple media fatigue. This wasn't the behavior of someone who had grown tired of attention. This was the systematic isolation of a figure who had become inconvenient. The man who had spent a lifetime in the classified world of national security seemed to have been swallowed back into it, but under circumstances that suggested something far more troubling than voluntary retirement from public life. Marcus Rodriguez, a former CIA analyst turned independent researcher, became one of the first to formally document what he termed the Eshed blackout. Rodriguez had spent decades tracking information suppression campaigns and recognized the hallmarks of professional intervention. This isn't someone who got cold feet, he explained in a podcast that would later be mysteriously removed from multiple platforms. This is someone who was reached by people with the authority and capability to make him disappear from the public discourse entirely. The evidence for Rodriguez's assessment was circumstantial but compelling. Israeli media outlets that had initially embraced the story began to distance themselves from it. Articles that had been published online started disappearing from archives. Search results that had once yielded dozens of reports about Eshed's claims began returning increasingly sparse results, as if the internet itself was being scrubbed of the inconvenient truth he had revealed. Even more disturbing were the reports from individuals who had attempted to make direct contact with Eshed through personal networks. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a Spanish astrophysicist who had collaborated with Eshed on satellite projects in the 1990s, described her experience in what would be one of the last detailed accounts to surface before she too went silent on the matter. I tried calling him through channels we had used for decades. Vasquez recounted in a leaked recording that surfaced briefly before being removed from the internet. The numbers had been disconnected. When I reached out through the Israeli Space Agency, I was told he was no longer available for consultation. When I pressed for details, I was informed that questions about General Eshed's availability were being handled by military intelligence. That's when I knew something was very wrong. The involvement of military intelligence was confirmed by other sources, though most spoke only on condition of anonymity. A former Mossad operative, identified only as David, provided perhaps the most chilling account of Eshed's situation. Speaking through encrypted communications, David revealed that within days of the initial disclosure, Eshed had been placed under what intelligence agencies euphemistically call protective observation. It's not house arrest, David explained, but it might as well be. Every communication is monitored. Every movement is tracked. Every interaction is evaluated for security implications. They told him it was for his own protection, that his statements had made him a target for foreign intelligence services. But the real truth is that he had become the target. The official explanation, when pressed by persistent journalists, was that Eshed's advanced age and the stress of international attention had led to health concerns that required medical supervision. But those who knew him personally painted a different picture. Friends and colleagues described a man who, despite his 87 years, had remained sharp, engaged, and physically active until the moment he disappeared from public view. Dr. Michael Brennan, a former colleague from joint U.S.-Israeli space projects, was among the last to speak with Eshed directly. Their conversation, which took place via encrypted video call just 3 weeks after the initial disclosure, revealed a man who was not suffering from age-related decline, but was instead displaying signs of extreme stress and paranoia. He kept looking over his shoulder, Brennan recalled. He said he was being watched, that there were people following him, that his phone was being monitored. But then he said something that really stuck with me. He said, "Michael, I thought I understood the game. I thought I knew the rules. But I was wrong. There are players in this game that are bigger than governments, bigger than nations, and I may have made a terrible mistake." Those would be among the last words anyone outside official channels would hear from Haim Eshed. Within days of his conversation with Brennan, all contact with the outside world ceased entirely. His home in Tel Aviv became inaccessible to visitors. His usual haunts, the cafes where he had held informal meetings with colleagues, the university where he had occasionally lectured, no longer saw him. The few photographs that emerged from this period painted a disturbing picture. Grainy images captured by long-range cameras showed a man who appeared to have aged dramatically in just a few weeks. Eshed, by the summer of 2021, 6 months after Haim Eshed's last public appearance, a disturbing pattern had emerged that extended far beyond the disappearance of a single individual. Researchers investigating his fate began to uncover evidence of a systematic campaign that reached into the highest levels of international intelligence communities, suggesting coordination between agencies that rarely cooperated on such a scale. The first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Morrison, a former NSA cryptanalyst who had become a whistleblower advocate, received a cache of encrypted communications through channels he would never publicly identify. The documents, which Morrison verified using techniques developed during his intelligence career, painted a picture of an operation codenamed Silent Shepherd, a multinational effort to contain the fallout from what intelligence agencies internally referred to as the Eshed incident. The communications revealed that within 72 hours of Eshed's initial disclosure, emergency protocols had been activated across multiple intelligence agencies. The CIA, Mossad, MI6, and at least 4 other national intelligence services had established a joint task force with a single mandate: neutralize the threat to what they termed cosmic operational security posed by Eshed's revelations. The documents show this wasn't just about damage control. Morrison explained in a secure location, his identity obscured for his own protection. This was about protecting what they call the most critical national security asset in human history. They weren't just worried about public panic or diplomatic complications. They were terrified that Eshed's disclosures would compromise ongoing operations that apparently involved direct cooperation with non-human intelligences. The scope of Operation Silent Shepherd was breathtaking in its ambition and chilling in its implications. The leaked documents outlined a comprehensive strategy that included media manipulation, academic pressure, and what intelligence professionals call social network disruption, the systematic isolation of target individuals from their support systems and sources of public influence. But perhaps most disturbing were references to something called Protocol 7, which appeared to involve direct intervention by what the documents cryptically referred to as Federation representatives. The implications were staggering. If the communications were authentic, they suggested that the Galactic Federation itself had become involved in managing Eshed's disappearance from public view. Independent verification of these claims came from an unlikely source. Dr. Lu Wei, a Chinese astrophysicist who had worked on classified space programs for the People's Liberation Army, surfaced briefly in Hong Kong before disappearing himself. In the hours before his own vanishing, Lu managed to transmit a video message that corroborated key elements of the leaked intelligence documents. The Chinese space program has been aware of non-terrestrial cooperation for decades, Lu stated in heavily accented English, glancing frequently off camera as if expecting interruption. When the Israeli general spoke publicly, it created what we call a cascade failure in security protocols. All nations involved in the program immediately activated containment procedures. But what the public doesn't understand is that these procedures were not developed by human intelligence agencies alone. Lu's message included references to coordination protocols that had been established through what he termed interspecies intelligence sharing agreements. According to his account, the systematic silencing of individuals who revealed classified extraterrestrial cooperation was not just a human response. It was part of agreements that had been negotiated directly with Federation representatives. The video cut off abruptly, and Lu Wei has not been seen publicly since. Chinese authorities have provided no information about his whereabouts, and diplomatic inquiries have been met with standard denials of any knowledge of his activities or location. Meanwhile, the fate of Haim Eshed remained shrouded in official silence. Israeli authorities continued to deflect inquiries with vague references to health concerns and privacy rights. But investigators pursuing the case began to uncover evidence that suggested a far more complex situation than simple medical supervision. Dr. Rachel Goldman, a physician who had treated Eshed for minor ailments over several years, broke her professional silence in late 2021 with revelations that added new dimensions to the mystery. Speaking through an attorney to protect herself from potential retaliation, Goldman revealed that she had been contacted by Israeli intelligence services just days after Eshed's disclosure and instructed to prepare a comprehensive medical evaluation that would support claims of age-related cognitive decline. They wanted documentation that would explain away his statements as the confusion of an elderly man, Goldman revealed through her legal representative. But I had examined General Eshed just months before his public disclosure. He was sharp, focused, completely coherent. There was no evidence of any cognitive impairment whatsoever. When I refused to provide false documentation, I was told that my cooperation was a matter of national security. Goldman's account was corroborated by other medical professionals who had been approached with similar requests. The pattern suggested a coordinated effort to construct a narrative that would discredit Eshed's claims by questioning his mental competence, a strategy that would allow authorities to dismiss his revelations without directly addressing their content. But perhaps the most chilling evidence of the scope of the cover-up came from an analysis of global communication patterns conducted by a team of data scientists working under assumed identities. Their research, published briefly on academic servers before being removed, documented what they termed coordinated information suppression on a scale previously associated only with major military operations. The analysis revealed that within weeks of Eshed's disclosure, search algorithms had been modified to reduce the visibility of related content. Social media platforms had implemented shadow banning protocols that limited the reach of posts discussing the Galactic Federation. News aggregation sites had quietly adjusted their algorithms to deprioritize stories related to Eshed's claims. The coordination required for such widespread manipulation suggested involvement at the highest levels of both government and corporate power structures. More disturbing still were the documented cases of individuals who had attempted to investigate Eshed's disappearance and subsequently faced their own forms of harassment and intimidation. Dr. Sarah Shin, the journalist who had first documented the pattern of Eshed's retreat from public view, reported a series of incidents that suggested professional surveillance. Her home had been broken into with nothing stolen but clear signs that her personal papers had been photographed. Her secure communications had been compromised. Sources who had previously spoken freely about the case suddenly became unavailable or claimed to have no knowledge of previous conversations. The message was clear. Investigating the Eshed case carried risks that extended far beyond professional embarrassment or career damage. Those who persisted in seeking answers found themselves facing the same forces that had silenced the former Israeli space chief. As 2020